Hello everyone, I'm Dr. William Klutho, a pediatrician here to talk to you today about children with ADHD and understanding how their brains work. Now, having a child with attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or ADHD, can often be challenging. Many neurodivergent children, such as kids with ADHD, struggle in areas of attention, impulsivity, and emotional regulation. Why is it that these children can hyper-focus on Legos or video games for hours, but they can't seem to remember to put on their shoes? Or why is it that they seem to react so strongly to seemingly small frustrations? Well, today, we're going to take a deep dive into the ADHD brain, how it's wired differently, and what that means for your child's behavior, emotions, and learning. And hopefully, by knowing more about how your child's brain works, you'll be able to better help them during their struggles. So whether you're a parent, educator, or just someone wanting to understand ADHD better, this video will help you see ADHD through a new lens. So before we talk about ADHD, let's talk about the brain in general. Many behavioral psychologists separate the brain into three main parts. First is the reptilian brain, or the brainstem. So this is the oldest part of the brain, and it is responsible for survival, keeping our heart beating, our lungs breathing, temperature regulation, things like that. Number two is the limbic system. So this is the emotional center of the brain. It is home to the amygdala, which processes fear and stress, and the hippocampus, which manages memory. And then lastly is the prefrontal cortex. Okay, this is the frontal part of the brain, and this is where higher thinking happens. Things like planning, long-term decision making, impulse control, and focus. Now, these areas of the brain grow and develop at different stages of our life. The brainstem, or reptilian brain, is the most developed part as a newborn. The limbic system, or emotional center of the brain, grows quickly during the early years of childhood and is highly developed by the time most children are 8. The prefrontal cortex, on the other hand, where the higher level brain thinking occurs, well, that develops over a long period of time. It isn't fully developed until most people are about 25 years old. Now let's talk about executive function and ADHD. Executive functioning helps us to stay on task. It controls impulses and helps us manage emotions. But in kids with ADHD, this area of the brain that controls these tasks, the prefrontal cortex, that develops more slowly. Imaging studies have shown that kids with ADHD can often be 1 to 3 years behind their peers in this area of the brain. So imagine being an 8-year-old child with ADHD and trying to manage their attention and their responsibilities with the brain development of a 5 or 6-year-old. That's a big difference. It explains why many kids with ADHD struggle with things like following multi-step commands, managing time or planning ahead, transitioning between one task to another, controlling emotions in the moment, and remembering things that they were just told. Now, in addition to brain development, the neurochemical called dopamine, also known as the motivational chemical of the brain, does not appear to flow as easily into the prefrontal cortex of the ADHD brain as a neurotypical kid. This lack of dopamine makes it harder for them to stay engaged in tasks that just aren't immediately rewarding. Think of it like the difference between trying to start a fire with a match and lighter fluid versus someone with ADHD trying to start a fire by rubbing 2 sticks together. This is much harder and takes a much longer time if you don't have the proper fuel, like dopamine. This explains why kids with ADHD can focus for hours on things they love, like video games, but struggle with things that don't naturally excite them, like homework or doing their chores. Now, stimulant medicines, like Adderall, for example, they work for many children because they help stimulate that flow of dopamine into that prefrontal cortex. And in doing so, this allows for more focus and self-control. Now, of course, any treatment like this should be thoroughly discussed with your child's pediatrician or pediatric psychiatrist. That way you can review for each of these medicines any benefits and side effects that may occur. Now, when the brain is stressed for any reason, it tends to revert back to the commands of the earliest developed part of the brain. For a child, the most developed part of the brain is the limbic system, or that emotional center of the brain. Within the emotional center is the amygdala, and that controls our fight, flight, or freeze response. The prefrontal cortex, it tends to be underactivated in children with ADHD. But the amygdala, it can often be overactive in these kids. This means they react more strongly to frustration, stress, or discipline. If you've ever seen a child, any child, have an explosive reaction over something minor, their emotional brain has taken over, and their thinking brain is completely offline. Now, in these moments, reasoning won't work because the brain isn't ready to listen. The best thing you can do, help them to calm down first, and then talk to them later. So now that we know how a child's ADHD brain works, what can we do to support kids with ADHD? I want to review a few actionable strategies that might be able to help your child today. First off, focus on whole body and brain health. Children who get age-appropriate sleep and nutrition are more likely to have a fully functional and growing brain. Avoid high-sugar foods or substances that can irritate the brain, such as synthetic food dyes. Additionally, omega-3 fatty acids such as fish oil have been shown to decrease inflammation in the brain. So it can be beneficial as a nutritional supplement for some children. Help support children in using their thinking brain. Consistency and routines help children to stay on task more easily. So use things like timers or checklists, reminders, these things to help your child. Break tasks into small, achievable steps, and use visual schedules instead of just verbal instructions. Help them with emotional regulation. Teach children deep breathing and mindfulness exercises to help them with their emotions. Help them label their emotions. Naming emotions gives children more control over their emotions and also validates those feelings. Practice a calm down plan before a meltdown happens. This will likely take multiple attempts, but it's well worth it. And then help them to boost dopamine naturally. Kids with ADHD often focus better when they are able to physically move. Make boring tasks more engaging with things like novelty or competition, and then remove unneeded distractions. This would be like a background TV noise. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this, is that ADHD is not a sign of a lack of intelligence or a lack of effort. It's a difference in brain wiring. Children with ADHD are just as capable of achieving a great deal, not just in school, but throughout their life. I hope some of these lessons and strategies we've talked about have been helpful. Of course, some children with ADHD will benefit from additional tools, such as medication, to help them achieve their full potential. If you believe that this would be beneficial for your child, I would encourage you to talk to your local pediatrician. I'm Dr. Klutho, and thank you very much for watching. If you found this helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit from this. Your child is lucky to have you. Have a blessed day.